Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
You undecided voters often watch these debates, like the one we saw tonight, to try to help them make up their minds. We have a group of undecided voters in the battleground state of Arizona. They've been watching the vice presidential debate. Sarah Seidner is with them in Phoenix. So, Sarah, what did the voters think of the candidates' performances?
Yeah, it's really interesting. They thought it was a good debate overall, but let's ask them. Let's go ahead and talk to Tyler here. You're 19 years old. This is your first time voting in a presidential election. In one word, describe to me the performance of Vice President Pence.
Shifty.
Shifty, okay. And now we're going to go back behind you to Deborah. Deborah, tell me, you have in the past, I think you voted for President Trump back in 2016. You are now on the fence, undecided. In one word, describe to me what you thought of Vice President Pence's performance.
Confident.
Okay. So you've got Tyler Shifty, we've got Deborah, who is saying confident. Let's go back now here to, let's see, who is in the back here? Sam. Sam, you're back here. I saw you a little bit nodding and engaging as you're watching this. One word to describe how Vice President Pence did.
Not sincere.
Okay. So Shifty, confident, not sincere. Morgan, front row. You were very engaged as well. I was watching you going up and down with your device. What did you think of Vice President Pence in one word?
Stubborn.
Stubborn. Okay. All right, Judy, we've got you back here. You voted for President Trump, I think, in 2016. Is that right?
Yes.
You're on the fence, but leaning towards Trump. What did you think of his vice president?
Overtime.
What did you say?
Overtime. He kept stealing her time.
Okay. So going over time, taking, interrupting and going over time. Okay. All right. Joseph, you are back here. I think you are leaning towards Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. What did you think of Vice President Trump's performance?
He was evasive.
Evasive. Okay. All right. We have Bob here, who's sitting in the front. Bob, you were listening intently. What did you think of the Vice President?
Polished.
Polished. Okay. Very positive reaction to how he performed tonight. Okay.
Right.
Anessa, you have sort of talked to me a little bit about how important this vice presidential debate is to you. What did you think of Vice President Pence?
Calculated.
Calculated. Okay. Now we have you, Cody. You're also a first-time voter for the presidential election. You were leaning, I think, towards Trump. What did you think of his vice president?
Confident.
Confident. So we've got two confidents. And last but certainly not least, Dennis, you've been sitting back here patiently, ready to talk. One word to describe Vice President Pence.
I'll describe it as consistent because there was nothing new, no surprises.
Okay, nothing new and no surprises. Then we should also mention that there weren't any really huge moments except for one, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I also should mention that we have talked to these folks and sort of canvassed them about whether or not this debate has helped them decide who they're going to vote for in the 2020 election. We've got some good answers. I'm going to toss it back to you, Wolfman Anderson.
You know, the undecided voters, Sarah, they had some strong reaction to the discussion about the coronavirus. Both men and women agreed with Senator Harris's criticism of the Trump administration's response. Before we show you that, take a look at how the voters' reactions will appear at the bottom of your screen. Men's responses are in green, women in yellow. When the lines go up, that means this group liked what they heard. If the lines go down, this means the group didn't like the candidate's answer. Now let's listen to those key moments for Senator Harris. Watch this.
And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage to be a leader, speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves.
All right, so Sarah, why did that moment resonate with the undecided voters?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. That was a very strong performance. The men, by the way, if you watched throughout the debate, the men tended to be much more decisive, much more emotional about what they strongly agreed with, and they went up quite a few times. I'm going to start back here with Dennis. Dennis, Kamala Harris, this was a strong reaction from the men as much as anyone, but the women as well, strongly reacted when Kamala Harris sort of went on the attack and said, look, the president knew very early on, before the American public, that indeed COVID was dangerous, and he hid that from the public. What did you think of that response?
Well, hiding it from the public, or perhaps trying to protect the public from fear, maybe the terms that I might use. But I will also say that, in talking about the large number of deaths that we had, if we look at Americans in general, we're not really a whole bunch of conformists, and so I think we may have contributed to that, not because the president didn't take any specific action or enough action, but perhaps because we independently maybe didn't think it was necessary or hadn't bought into the seriousness yet.
Let me follow up with you, talking about the American public sort of wanting to have things their own way, and they don't always follow all the rules that are put out for them. Do you think that the president has something to do with that, because he was refusing to wear a mask or saying it wasn't that big a deal, and you wouldn't see him wearing a mask often? Do you think he played into the American idea that, like, I don't have to do this?
Well, I think some Americans might have read that, for sure, is that it wasn't serious in that respect. But let's face it, Pence was thrown into the limelight when he started running the coronavirus task force, and it was very straightforward. They had the science there. They had the facts and the science, and they seemed to be working with it.
Okay.
I trusted it.
Thank you very much for your answer. We're going to go to Anessa. Anessa, what did you think of Kamala Harris's, Senator Harris's response when she said, you all knew this and you kept it from us and put Americans in danger?
I think it was valid of her to bring up. However, I don't necessarily agree that that the president was jeopardizing Americans. I feel like Americans do their own research. They're well aware of what was going on with the virus. And I think Trump did, as soon as he was aware of the severity of it, I mean, they did put together a task force. They did what they could. So that's what I think.
Okay, and that's how you feel. Joseph, I'm going to go to you. What were your thoughts on that exchange there?
I thought that it was a very valid comment, because it's true. For me, when you're telling a reporter that it's very bad, you can get it through the air, and there's recommendations, and you're not following them, and you're downplaying them, and then consistently pushing the other way. I felt that was irresponsible of the administration, and they need to own it, that we didn't really believe in masks, and we didn't believe in doing anything preventative except staying at home, when we knew that it was really bad, and we knew it was bad early.
Okay.
And to blame it on China, it's our fault, because we didn't do our own research, and we didn't push to make sure that we were protecting the American people, and just being upfront and letting us make the decision. Telling us that it's going away, it's going to be fine, is not acceptable.
Do you feel like you were lied to?
Yes.
Okay.
We were.
So you heard there sort of the differing ideas of how this went down, but that was a very, very strong reaction from this group. Well,
Sarah, do the voters there with you think there was a clear winner tonight?
I'm going to ask that question. Show of hands. How many of you think that there was a clear winner tonight in this debate? 1, 2, 2 out of 10. Only 2 out of 10. So there's your answer, Wolf. Only 2 out of 10 people thought there was a clear winner. And I'm going to ask them now who they think it was. How many of you think that Vice President Pence won this debate? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 people out of 10. How many of you think Kamala Harris won this debate? Senator Harris, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a tie. 4 people think, and then there are obviously people, we only have 8 people who have think, so the other people who have not raised their hands, it was a wash, but 4 people think Kamala Harris won this debate, and 4 people out of 10 think that Vice President Pence won the debate.
It is Thursday, the 8th of October of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Oh my. Speaking of spicy, hey, I think Kamala curried our favor, don't you think? And Mike Pence, what a jar of mayo that guy is. Rancid mayo at that, it draws flies. My God. The image of that fly on his head spoke volumes. It really did. I think the fly was answering more than Mike Pence did. Yeah, that was bantered about quite a bit last night, and it was quite funny. It is true, Steve Schmidt on Ari did bring up that, back in the Middle Ages, if flies came to you, that meant that you were like marked by the devil. And Ari kind of goes, no, don't say that. But it's true. I don't know if Mike Pence is marked by the devil, but that was what people believed back in the Middle Ages when they were full of Christian superstition. Kind of like how we are now. So I wonder how that played in evangelical America, because there were no flies lighting upon Kamala. No, not at all. Only on Mike. Stayed there, apparently, for 2 minutes, 20-some-odd seconds, from what I read. Yep. And after all that, how can there be still undecided voters anywhere, let alone Arizona? God, I love that little rundown at the end. 4 thought Kamala won, 4 thought that Pence won, and 2, we don't know. Come on, the fly didn't like balance it out for you, and maybe said that flies are lighting on Mike. I don't want Mike. Oh, the debate commission issued an order. I think it was an order that the next presidential debate will be virtual, and Trump just went apocalyptic. Yeah, he went off. We'll put it that way. He will not take part in a virtual debate, which is quite odd, because Mitch McConnell is going to have a virtual hearing on ramming through Coney Barrett's position onto the Supreme Court. They can do that virtually, but no, can't have a virtual debate. That's not what it's about. And then he was telling Maria Bartiromo that he feels so good he wants to have a rally tonight. All right. And he made his doctors, all the doctors at Walter Reed apparently had to sign NDAs back in 2019. When he went into Walter Reed on a moment's notice, apparently, not even a notice. Took him to Walter Reed. They said, we were getting a jump on the physical. We're going to do part of the physical now. What? Yeah, they're going to do part of the physical because I think he had a stroke. I don't know how it is that somebody in a public position as Trump can demand NDAs of those who are supposed to keep us informed so that we can make our own decisions as a representative democracy, whatever that is. Oh, yeah, I forgot. They're not about democracy. Mike Lee let the cat out of the bag with a proclamation today. He said, we're not for democracy. Democracy pretty much is like, if we have democracy, they won't be here, lording over us. And they can't have that. They want peace, prosperity, and, I don't know, some other 1984 bullshit. Yeah. Peace is war, freedom is slavery, prosperity is, I guess, being locked in our homes because of a COVID pandemic, and we can't make any money. Thanks. And I guess we can blame the Chinese for that. How dare they? They put a curse on us. He's now into the magical realm. Yeah, the Republicans are full of magic and superstition. Yeah, the Chinese put a curse on us, a Chinese curse. Just don't call it racism. Oh, I saw a ballot or ballot recommendations by some police unions and actual police departments. And number one on the list is no on racial equality. No on racial equality. And then the cops are all pissed off because we're pointing out the systemic racism, and they insist there's no systemic racism. We just don't think there should be any racial equality. What? Well, as we know, and I brought it up many times, and even if it's only partly true, I still like it. There's a maximum IQ allowed to be a cop. If you get up too high, like into, let's just even say gifted range. If you're in like around 130, 132, that's gifted. You can't be a cop. Nope. Can't. Too smart. Oh, which also brings up another question. Chauvin, the guy that choked Floyd off with his knee on his neck, somehow was able to raise a $1 million bond, or somebody raised it for him. And then that kid, that big kid down in, was it Texas? I can't remember. Who shot the former black football player, the star of the community, the reconciliator of that community. In fact, he had been there breaking up a domestic disturbance when the young cop, who had never been in that area, but only on that force for six months, and before that he was a guard at a prison, which is a great training on how to be a cop, right? Anyway, shot this community leader. Well, he was black. Even apparently reports come out is that the kid, now when I say kid, I mean they're all kids to me because anybody under 40 is a kid now. But when the cop came upon the disturbance, because apparently he said there's a domestic disturbance, a fight, and some black guy came up and said, "Hi, glad that you're here. How are you doing?" Went to shake his hand, and the cop pretty much, backed off. Says, "Don't touch me." What? No systemic racism now. Okay. And as everybody's trying to tell the cop, hey, he broke this up. Everything's cool. Everything's like cool, man. No, they had to stun that guy. And when the stun gun threw the electric charge into the perp, the community leader, and he lurched from the electric jolt, the cops determined that to be a threatening posture. Oh, because I guess he lurched forward and he might be taking the stun gun away. Oh, my God. Yeah, out of pain and stuff. You want to stop the pain. So what did they do? They shot him dead. Just don't call it systemic racism. Just don't. The cops don't want you voting for racial equality. It makes their job a lot harder. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, you wouldn't have undecided voters if they could decide. They just can't. They just can't. On the rest of the menu, a panel of 3 appellate judges upheld a lower court order to let the 2020 census continue through October, but Trump filed an emergency order with the Supreme Court. He just does not want that census done by the end of the month. He wants it stopped now. An Atlanta housing concern was sued for illegally evicting residents during the pandemic. Yeah, they're trying to get away with that, and they have been for a while. And the risk to the Pentagon increased as the Marine Corps' number 2 officer tested positive for COVID-19. I wonder where he got it. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the trial of a Russian accused of murdering a Georgian Chechen last year, as reported here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and he murdered him in broad daylight in downtown Berlin on Moscow's orders. Well, that trial has begun, finally. And the European Union presented a 10-year plan to improve the plight of its large Roma minority. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And I got to just start off by saying thank you to you know who we're talking about, and we're talking about you. Yes, you. Thank you so much for your generous pledge, and thank you for allowing that to be up for a few months, because we do need it, and we thank you tremendously. Your generosity is above and beyond. And just for a little tidbit of information for you folks out there, if you could afford an espresso type coffee drink and send those funds our way, we stretch those dollars, pay our bills, and most importantly right now, because we're getting towards the end of the year, so it is crunch time. We have to finish purchasing the actual machinery that will replace the workhorses that have been working like horses all this time. And they're getting worn out. And the software is not being supported. You know, Adobe went away. Flash is going away in December. And I'm still on Windows 7 on the PC. And the MacBook has battery expansion. They have to be replaced. And we've identified them and put some payments down. And also we need all the software. They make you buy new software. I'm going to try to transfer as much as I can, because we stretch dollars on the quantum level. We leave no strange quark unstretched. Indeed. So if you could afford that espresso type coffee drink in these perilous times and send those funds our way, you help us fulfill our civic duties the founders originally intended. And that way it's not on the shoulders of those who are most generous. I mean, they have their own bills to pay, please. Okay. Anyway, thank you to all of you for your generosity and consideration. And right now, I want to really thank you, yes, you, for that generous pledge. Okay, it couldn't have come at a better time. It really lifted the spirits. I don't know. I'm simple that way. Indeed. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple because Tom made it simple. All you have to do is type in at Netroots Radio. And there you are. Thank you, Tom. And he does a lot more, too. He's been taking care of David's new branding and voiceovers and all the other stuff that you do for Netroots Radio. Thank you. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam. And you might as well follow me there because that's where I mostly, all the time, post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media. And I also post it on the show's Twitter account, which is at Cookbook West. So you could check it out there, too. And you can also pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right, let's get into this story about these appellate court judges who, in one way, put the kibosh on Trump in his efforts to stop, reapportionment so that Democrats might be able to have some sort of balance in our democracy. He has to stop that. Yeah, they want peace, prosperity, and peace, prosperity. What was the other one? I don't know. It's all 1984-ish anyway, and they want to stop us. They're coming for us, indeed. So, in one way, it was good news, and then, of course, on another side, they got to balance it out. Because, this is the Trump era, apparently. A panel of 3 appellate judges yesterday, Wednesday, upheld a lower court order allowing the 2020 head count of every U.S. resident to continue through October. But, and there's always a but, the panel struck down a provision that had suspended a year-end deadline for submitting figures used to decide how many congressional seats each state gets. Apportionment. The ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco, that used to be called the Liberal Court, upheld part of U.S. District Judge Lucy Koh's preliminary injunction last month and rejected part of it. Koh's preliminary injunction suspended a September 30 deadline for finishing the 2020 census and a December 31 deadline for submitting numbers used to determine how many congressional seats each state gets. And that's a process known as apportionment. Indeed. Because of these actions, the deadlines reverted back to a previous Census Bureau plan that had field operations ending October 31 and the reporting of apportionment figures at the end of April. By issuing the injunction, Koh sided with a coalition of civil rights groups and local governments which had sued the Trump administration, arguing minorities and others in hard-to-count communities would be missed if the counting ended in September instead of October. But the Trump administration attorneys had argued the Census Bureau was obligated to meet the congressionally mandated requirement to turn in apportionment numbers by December 31. Koh also struck down an October 5 end date that the Commerce Department, which oversees the Census Bureau, had pushed after the injunction, saying it violated her order. Hours after Wednesday's ruling, the Trump administration asked the U.S. Supreme Court to put an immediate hold on the injunction while it appeals. Ron Harris and Sudhi Thanawala of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The owners of an Atlanta area housing site are illegally throwing out residents struggling to make ends meet amid the coronavirus pandemic and have failed to address roaches, bed bugs, and other problems in those living accommodations. Protesters and a lawsuit say. About 24 former residents of the Efficiency Lodge in DeKalb County and others demonstrated yesterday, Wednesday, across from the suburban Atlanta complex. The protest came as millions of Americans are struggling amid the lingering outbreak to make rent or other lodging payments that keep them off the streets. Some carried signs accusing the owners of being slumlords. One woman shouted through a bullhorn, and some raised clenched fists. The Trump administration has issued a national moratorium on evictions in a bid to provide a measure of relief to those struggling, but critics warn that the moratorium will only delay a wave of crushing debt and homelessness without additional relief. Yet, the moratorium does not apply to motels and hotels, and some owners have argued they fall in that category, though their properties function as permanent housing. Federal, state, and local governments have approved eviction moratoriums during the course of the pandemic for many renters, but those protections are expiring rapidly. Bill Stewart and Idris Ali of Reuters bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Marine Corps said yesterday, Wednesday, as number 2 officer, General Gary Thomas had tested positive for COVID-19, becoming the second senior military officer to do so this week. Another sign of the danger to top brass, who met both men at the Pentagon. Thomas, the Marine Corps' assistant commandant, is suffering mild symptoms and is self-quarantining at home. Reuters was the first to report Thomas's positive result. Nearly all the Joint Chiefs of Staff, including its chairman, Army General Mark Milley, are in quarantine after attending top-level meetings last week with Thomas and the Coast Guard's number 2 official, Admiral Charles Ray, who tested positive on Monday for the disease caused by the coronavirus. The list of top generals quarantining reads like a who's who of the U.S. military, and I bet Vlad has the list in hand right now. Of course he does. And that includes General Paul Nakasone, head of the NSA, and U.S. Cyber Command, as well as the chiefs of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Space Force. Well, you don't have to worry about the Space Force. What are they there for anyway? At this time, we have no additional senior leader positive test results to report. Pentagon spokesman Jonathan Huffman said in a statement, "Right now they don't. We will continue to follow CDC guidelines for self-quarantining and contact tracing." Too bad they can't do that in the White House. And Hoffman said, referring to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Hoffman offered no further details, including whether any other top generals were experiencing potential symptoms. The disclosure risks adding to a growing sense of uncertainty about the degree of risk to America's national security leadership as Trump himself tries to bounce back from the illness. Well, he says he's so well, he's going to go on a rally as long as they keep giving him the decks. The White House says the rise in cases among senior White House officials and others in Washington has not disrupted the government because that's what they always say. They know for a fact they're turning over everything to Vlad anyway. Look at Mike Lee's statement. Representative Adam Smith, chairman of the Democratic-led House Armed Services Committee, warned in a terse statement, "Our adversaries are always looking for any weakness to exploit. While our military can still operate, while leadership is quarantined, the national security implications of Trump's recklessness cannot be overstated," Smith added. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60 Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. During the summer, blue whales in the northeastern Pacific spend their days feeding on massive amounts of tiny plankton called krill. In fact, krill is all they eat.
It really is remarkable that such a small animal is able to sustain the largest life form that's ever existed on this planet.
Stanford University marine ecologist Will Astrike.
And to maintain themselves at that body size, they have pretty extreme feeding habits.
A blue whale consumes many tons of krill every day. Eating keeps the ocean giants occupied during daylight hours when they dive hundreds of feet below the surface, where krill congregate in dense swarms. But at night, when their prey disperse, the whales start to sing.
And they'll sing for 10, 12 hours straight.
The song you just heard was sped up 10 times.
Which brings the sound up more into human hearing range.
Speeding up the song enables researchers to more easily study whales' deep and resonant songs, which can be heard by other whales across vast distances in the ocean.
It's very likely that song in blue whales is related to some sort of reproductive function, whether that's attracting a mate or warding off other males.
Since 2015, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute has been recording the songs of blue whales with an underwater microphone attached to the sea floor.
24/7, 365 days a year, giving an audio feed of all of the sounds being produced in and around Monterey Bay.
When Astrike and his team analyzed the blue whale's singing behavior across seasons, they noticed an unusual pattern. As summer gave way to fall and winter, the whales changed when they sang.
There was more song during the daytime than during the nighttime.
To learn more, the scientists tagged individual whales to keep tabs on both their feeding and singing behavior. As summer krill concentrations wane, the whales begin a long southward migration to their breeding grounds off the coast of Mexico and Central America.
Once they start migrating, feeding at depth isn't really a part of the equation anymore, so they switch their primary time of song production to the daytime.
Knowing when to leave is crucial.
It's really critical that the timing of this transition from feeding to migration be synced with other things happening in their habitats.
The researchers think the seasonal change in singing patterns signals the start of migration, which means
we're now able to determine when the population has switched from feeding to migration.
The study is in the journal Current Biology. The blue whale song recording is courtesy of John Ryan and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. Blue whales are endangered, but being able to monitor what they're up to in real time could be a boon to conservation efforts, if we're willing to listen. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. Those at increased risk for flu complications include children under the age of 5 and adults 65 and older, people with chronic health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, and pregnant women. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1871. That was the day that the Great Chicago Fire began. The fire started in a barn on the property of Patrick and Catherine O'Leary. Legend pins the blame for starting the fire on a cow. Whatever the cause, the fire spread quickly throughout the city's wooden houses. For 2 days, the uncontrollable fire raged, destroying everything in its path. In the wake of its devastation, nearly 300 people died, and 100,000 families had their homes destroyed. One person who lost her business in the fire was renowned labor leader Mother Jones. In her autobiography, she wrote about the fire destroying her dress shop, saying, quote, "The Great Chicago Fire burned up our establishment and everything that we had. The fire made thousands homeless. We stayed all night and the next day without food on the lakefront, often going into the lake to keep cool." Millions of dollars were raised by the Chicago Relief and Aid Society to help those who needed help to rebuild. While the society did provide significant aid, treatment varied along class lines. To get assistance, the working class had to prove themselves worthy with personal references. Middle-class applicants for aid were more likely to be quickly approved to get money to rebuild. Working-class people had to wade through long approval processes. Some never received that approval. The experience galvanized some members of the working class to organize for change. One of them was Mother Jones. She wrote, "From the time of the Chicago fire, I became more and more engrossed in the labor struggle, and I decided to take an active part in the efforts of working people to better the conditions under which they worked and lived." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Thursday morning began with an announcement from the Commission on Presidential Debates that the next one, scheduled for next Thursday, October 15th, would be a virtual town hall meeting. The moderator and questioners would be in Miami at the Arsh Center, but Biden and Trump would appear remotely on video. Remember, Donald Trump just announced he's positive for COVID-19 less than a week ago. Well, within an hour or so of the announcement, Trump, appearing on Fox Business, said,
"The Commission on Presidential Debates announcing this morning that the second presidential debate will be virtual. Are you saying you're not going to participate?"
No, I'm not going to waste my time on a virtual debate. That's not what debating's all about. You sit behind a computer and do a debate. It's ridiculous. And then they cut you off whenever they want.
Alrighty then. On Wednesday night in Salt Lake City, Utah, Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Kamala Harris clashed over Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic in their only debate scheduled. Harris called Trump's response to the pandemic, which has now killed 212,000 people in the United States,
the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. 210,000 dead people in our country. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. Frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the vice president and the president were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan.
In a notable non-answer, one among many, Mike Pence sidestepped the question of what he would do if Trump wouldn't accept a peaceful transition of power. Instead, he admonished Harris, saying that your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the previous election. He then lied about the FBI spying on Trump's campaign, something that never happened. At the end of the night, Karen Pence walked on stage without a mask, flouting the debate rules. Some people never learn. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues gaslighting America. He released a new video on Wednesday, though it's unclear exactly when it was recorded, in which he said that getting the coronavirus was likely a blessing from God. Really? A disease that has killed 213,000 Americans this year? In a video message outside the White House in which he did not look well, and his makeup was even weirder than usual. But Trump also used the video to hawk an unapproved treatment he received called Regeneron as a miracle cure, and he promised that anyone who needs it will get it for free. Remember, this is still an experimental antibody therapy that was given to the president, well, because he's the president. It's still in clinical trials and has had limited use, and Donald Trump is proclaiming it a cure. Lovely. He's still not only downplaying the dangers of COVID, but downplaying his own situation. While former New Jersey Governor Christie remained hospitalized on Wednesday, 4 days after he revealed that he too had tested positive for the coronavirus. Christie is one of at least 5 people who helped prep Trump for last week's debate and have now tested positive for the virus, including Kellyanne Conway and Stephen Miller. Christie said that no one wore face masks during those prep sessions. And now, Thursday morning, there's another one. Creed Bailey, who handles White House access credentials and security clearances, is said to be gravely ill after also testing positive for the coronavirus. In non-COVID news, Donald Trump lost another round on Wednesday as the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan ruled that his accountant must turn over his tax records to a New York State prosecutor. So remember the outrage over then FBI Director James Comey making sweeping pronouncements in the days leading up to the 2016 election day because of a Department of Justice rule that generally bars prosecutors not only from making any announcement about ongoing investigations close to an election, but also from taking any public steps before the end of voting because the publicity could tip the balance of a race? Well, to quote Emily Litella,
never mind.
Yeah, the Department of Justice did a 180, freeing prosecutors to not worry about election interference, allowing federal investigators to take public investigative steps before the polls close, even if those actions risk affecting the outcome of the election. Why isn't Bill Barr being impeached already? There are lots of historical firsts happening this election season, including this one. In an unprecedented move, the New England Journal of Medicine released an editorial Wednesday lambasting the Trump administration's response to COVID-19 and calling on Americans to vote Trump out of office next month. The journal's editorial board said November's election will have life or death consequences for people regardless of party alignment. This is the first time in the journal's 208-year history that the editors have ever published an editorial about an election. So denial is not only a river running through West Wing workers. The Wall Street Journal now reporting that in Colorado, Republican Representative Doug Lamborn's Washington office, 2 staffers have tested positive in the last few days. This according to a person familiar with the office who said there is no contact tracing in place and that staffers there were told not to disclose to roommates that they may have been exposed. Lamborn's spokesperson said that staff members were instructed to protect each other's medical privacy, but weren't told to hide cases. She added that Lamborn himself has not been tested, citing advice from the doctor of Congress? Oy. Well, we've now learned that Donald Trump required personnel at Walter Reed National Medical Center to sign non-disclosure agreements last year before they could be involved with treating him. Meanwhile, the reason for his trip last year remains a mystery, and 4 people familiar with the process didn't know whether, during his most recent visit over the weekend, Trump had the same requirement for Walter Reed staff members who had not previously been involved in his care. And way to go, Vermont. Vermont now becomes the 11th state to legalize adult-use marijuana sales, as Republican Governor Phil Scott announced that he would permit legislation, Senate Bill 54, to become law without him actually having to sign the bill. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener-supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like fall. And we're only going to get up to about 78 today, which is kind of low for around here, as it has been. We've been under somewhat of a heat wave. Let's see if we still have an air quality alert. Yes, we do indeed, because smoke is in the area being blown in by various wildfires in the region and near the region. Partly cloudy today, with some clouds in the morning, and will give way to generally sunny skies in the afternoon. Winds are light and variable, highs around 78, as I mentioned. Generally clear tonight, with a low around 45 or so. Winds light and variable. Abundant sunshine tomorrow. Highs around 77. Winds out of the south at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we do have low pressure sitting off the coast that's supposed to bring us rain starting late tomorrow. And we were expecting about 3/4 of an inch dropping on Saturday. They brought that down a bit to a little bit under half an inch. Let's see. Though it looks like there is more low pressure out there with some more rainstorms that could be coming in next week. And yes, we want them. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County down here in Southern Oregon stand now at 1,295. 1,295 have almost 2,000. We're spiking every day at a dozen or more. And the deceased confirmed stands at 6. Ragweed pollen is high, and right outside the window here at the mothership proper, the air quality index is unhealthy at 151 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate for a fall season at 4. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.92 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 95%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. They do. London is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 66 and cloudy. Rome is 75 and sunny. Kyiv is 60 degrees with a light rain shower. Kabul is 69 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 73 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 60 with rain. Sydney, Australia is 65 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 60 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, with another wind advisory. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. David Rising of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Russian accused of killing a Georgian man in broad daylight in downtown Berlin on Moscow's orders went on trial for murder yesterday, Wednesday, in a case that has contributed to growing frictions between Germany and Russia. The defendant, Vadim Karasikov, using the alias Vadim Solikov, traveled to the German capital last August on the orders of the Russian government to kill a Georgian citizen of Chechen ethnicity who fought Russian troops in Chechnya. State agencies of the central government of the Russian Federation gave the defendant the contract to liquidate the Georgian citizen with Chechen roots. Prosecutor Ronald Gorg said the defendant took the contract either for an unknown sum of money or because he shared the motive of those who gave the contract to liquidate the victim as a political enemy in revenge for his role in the Second Chechen War and participation in other armed conflicts against the Russian Federation. No pleas are entered in the German trial system, and the defendant made only a short statement as the trial began under tight security and coronavirus precautions, saying that he had been misidentified and was a 50-year-old born in Russia, not a 55-year-old born in Kazakhstan as alleged. Presiding Judge Olaf Arnoldi took the unusual step of advising the suspect of his right to remain silent before asking him any basic personal details, saying that in this case, even those statements could be self-incriminating.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers
Rafe Cassert of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Europe's treatment of its Roma people has been excusable over the past decade, a top EU official said as she presented a 10-year plan to improve the life of the large ethnic minority. Around 6 million Roma live in the 27-nation bloc, where the European Commission said 41% experienced discrimination over the past 5 years, and 85% of Roma children are at risk of poverty, compared to 20% of children overall in the EU. Simply put, over the last 10 years, we have done not enough to support the Roma population in the EU. This is inexcusable, EU Vice President Vera Jourova said. We cannot accept it. As she presented a 10-year plan to improve the plight of the Roma, who are among the poorest and least educated in Central Europe and have been discriminated against for centuries indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio's broadcasting on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.